So my name is Sherri Shimansky. I'm a dual master student over at Arizona State University. I'm concentrating on LGBTQI issues in both of my programs, which is social work and public administration. I'm a community outreach person for PFLAG Phoenix, and I also facilitate support groups for significant others, family, friends, and allies of our transgender population. So with that, I think in a nutshell, I'm just basically a cisgender trans ally. I'm going to have each of our panelists go ahead and introduce themselves and give just a very brief introduction of like their personal stories. Go ahead, Logan.
I'm Logan. I am also a cisgender trans ally. I entered the community through my very brave daughter who transitioned from male to female in kindergarten. And I've since worked with TIFA, Trans Youth Family Allies, and SAGA, Southern Arizona Gender Alliance through Wingspan. And that's my intro in a nutshell.
I'm Erica Keppler. I'm a co-founder and co-chair of Arizona Trans Alliance. I'm also the current chair of Arizona Stonewall Democrats. I work on many areas of transgender activism and LGBT activism. I identify as a transsexual woman. I've started my transition in 2005, and people see me in and around the community quite a bit. So.
My name's Julian Melson. I transitioned about 6 years ago, and I work in the medical field, but where I get my joy is doing educational panels, trainings, and being visible. I think the best way to dispel myths about our community is to educate. So it's my pleasure to be here, and I will answer any question you have. Nothing will offend me. If you're not comfortable asking here, please see me. I'll be here all weekend.
Hi, my name is this on? My name is Thomas Beatie. I'm a female to male transgender person. You may have seen me. I'm the pregnant guy that was in the media. I'm starting in 2008. Thanks. I just moved here recently with my wife Nancy, and we have 3 beautiful children. And as of late, I've been doing a lot of public speaking, and I'm really excited to be here and connect with the GLBT community.
Okay, with that, I think one of the things that we noticed when watching the movies ourselves were the different terms that were being used, and since this is an educational panel, we kind of wanted to make sure that people were all on the same page and understood some of the terms that were being used. I didn't know if either Erica or Julian, if you could help us understand. We heard queer a lot in these movies, and there were references to transgender, but also gender fluid and gender queer. Erica, could you possibly help us understand the differences?
The first thing I think is important to say about any of those kind of terms is that you have to be very careful when you make a distinction between using those terms to identify for yourself and using those terms to apply to other people. That ideally, in the best scenario, those are terms that a person accepts for themselves and embraces as their own personal identity. And it becomes necessary at times in describing and talking about these subjects to apply them to other people, but you always have to be a little bit conscious that you might run afoul of someone's own personal identity, these things. And also, when it comes to regard to these terms, that you're not going to find any universal agreement about what these terms mean. That there are very, very strong opinions about what those terms mean, and very, very strong disagreement. And any definition that I or anyone up here might give you, there will be someone out there who not only disagree with it, they'll disagree with it angrily, and they might disagree with it violently. So don't just assume that someone gives you a definition, you can walk up to somebody you know and just start using a term to describe them because you might upset them. But that being said, there is sort of a general movement and consensus on what these kind of terms tend to mean. And transgender, as people generally come to view it, is a generic umbrella term that kind of encompasses all people who in one aspect of their life or another is inconsistent with what society expects them to be in presenting their gender. But it is a very generic term like car, as opposed to Chevy or Ford or something like that, that it can cover many different aspects of the community. there's a lot of different disagreement with the word transsexual. I identify the word transsexual. A lot of people want to attach a significance of surgery to that term. I disagree with that. To me, a transsexual is anybody who is committed to living the rest of their lives in the other gender role from what was assigned to them at birth. That does not necessitate any kind of a surgical component to it. It is really a term that describes the role in which you live. Queer is very much a term, in my opinion, that people accept for themselves, and you really need someone's permission before you begin applying it to other people. But a lot of people feel that term very, very strongly as meaning that, as I perceive it in others, and again, it's not a term I necessarily adopt for myself, so I have to make assumptions about how people see it in others, that someone who's identifying with the term queer identifies with pride in the fact that they are living their lives inconsistently with what society wants to tell them they have to live. And it is their right to do that, and in taking on that role, and the pride in that role, they are embracing the fact that they are living free and independently, and it's probably the truest of American spirit, counter to what the people want them to live. You know, how other identities I should cover? I think
you covered it.
Okay. Gender fluid, that's more of a kind of a clinical term is my perception, is to describe a person who doesn't necessarily latch into a particular expression of gender, that they may at different times in different places in different moments of their lives feel a desire and a need to express gender differently. At some times of their life they will feel more masculine, express more masculinity, sometimes they'll feel more feminine, express femininity. It could be a short-term concept, maybe from day to day they transition. Gender fluidity could describe a very long-term concept that in some period of their life they feel the need to express in one way, and then over many years they transition to some way. The very term simply is meant to suggest that a person isn't anchored and fixed in their sense of gender or their expression of gender, that it can change.
Okay. Does anybody else on the panel have anything they want to add to that? Okay, well, I think moving along that same thing would be, there was also a lot of references to the gender binary and it being a social construct and disagreement with there being such a black and white, male and female type of social construct in our society. Maybe, Thomas, you might be a good person to, could you talk about the difficulties this causes, the binary?
This, as far as the gentrification film, I found it quite fascinating because there are so many differences within our own community, and I think sometimes we forget about that. Even I come with preconceived notions, and I love the fact that when I was watching the film, one of the people in the film, I had it all wrong, and I thought that was awesome, you know, because I was trying to guess what was happening, and I didn't know from which place this person was coming from, and I came to realize that it just doesn't matter. And that's what I liked about this film, because it kind of had a Zen-like property, like wherever you go, there you are, and everything's okay. And the gender binary, yeah, I mean, we're all born, we've been bombarded with these messages since birth that, you know, it's ingrained in us what's male, what's female, and I think it's important to know that there are more than two genders. I liked what Kate Bornstein said, and when she commented on that with excitement, that she can't wait to see what kind of creative options people come with, you know, in the future with gender, I thought about an example of myself, because I don't really fit into that box. You know, there's a lot in the media lately about what's transgender, and a lot of people think that they're still a gender binary, that it's these people moving from male to female, female to male, and there's a million shades in between. And, you know, being a pregnant man, you know, wasn't the most popular thing for me to do, but I, in my own way, was making a statement. And all these people in the film, same thing there. And the trans community, the gay, lesbian, bisexual community, needs to also open their minds to this, because sometimes they think we're a little judgmental ourselves. So this film was for both our community and the community at large, and I think it was a fascinating educational film. I liked it.
Awesome.
Could talk about the social construct. Gender roles, they are social constructs, but I think that when they're described in terms of being social constructs, we kind of take on an assumption that they're purely arbitrary constructions. And I don't think that that's true. I think that the concepts of masculinity and femininity in their purest sense really are a part of human nature, that people really do identify with masculinity as kind of a sense of strength and power, and femininity is more of a sense of beauty. And there are many other elements to it, of course. But I think the societal constructs of gender and gender role are a reflection of human nature, but they're a funhouse mirror reflection. They exaggerate some things out of proportion, they take other things, they trivialize it down to utter insignificance. And it is further an element of human nature, just like the term we talked about earlier, to want to be able to have neat terms that define concepts very clearly. And so it is a basic part of the way humans think and societies work, that we want to make clear and distinct distinctions and definitions of things. And where that becomes unreasonable and cruel is when it says, when it defines things so sharply, and there are many, many people in the fluidity and the consistency between these things that don't neatly fit into either of them, and they're forced into lives that just don't fit them.
I think what we had heard in the movie as well is that we're not necessarily wanting to eliminate the binary. It's that we want to eliminate the oppression that's being... Or
not eliminate gender.
Right.
And it's certainly good to eliminate the concept of binary, but in the midst of it, it's folly to think that you could eliminate gender, because gender is a basic part about what it means to be human. But to try to eliminate the idea that you must fit into a societally defined role is unreasonable and cruel in our brief lives in this world.
Agreed. How about dysphoria? We heard the term dysphoria in the movie in regards to transgender and body dysphoria or gender dysphoria. Could anybody, and I know that the younger teens as well, once they hit puberty, can we have somebody go ahead and take on, what's the difference between just being a gender nonconformist and actually being a person who experiences gender dysphoria?
I can talk about that. In my own personal experience, when I was younger, I had a very liberal family, and they let me express myself any way that I chose. I played with trucks, I played with the boys and played in the mud, and that was my expression of what I like to do. But I don't like the word dysphoria. It implies that there's something wrong with me, but I wasn't comfortable with my body. I didn't like the configuration of my body. It wasn't comfortable with me. So that's the difference. They say that I have dysphoria because I didn't relate with the body that I had. I wanted a male body. But the way I expressed myself had nothing to do with that, if that makes any sense.
Sure. Anyone else?
Well, dysphoria is a Greek term that technically means deep discontent. That if you're very, very unhappy with something, you're dysphoric in it. If you don't think you're making enough money, you have paycheck dysphoria. So and gender dysphoria kind of got adopted as an alternative to the clinically accepted term was gender identity disorder, which does definitely mean there's something wrong with your gender and your sense of gender, and it was kind of adopted as something that sounds clinical, but basically just says I am unhappy with my gender.
So Logan, talking about our little T's, our youth. What are you seeing and what is your experience? How young are you seeing our children starting to express now their preferred genders?
There's always some question from the time they can express themselves. 2 to 3 years old, they're acting out in ways that draw attention. The parents think are maybe peculiar behaviors for their little boy or their little girl. They're breaking the rules of what they were expected. They're not filling the gender typical behaviors that the parents were anticipating. So the kids aren't, they're not filling the preconceived ideas of what their son or daughter would do from the time of 2 to 3 years old. 3-year-olds are the earliest that we have contacting us. The parents are contacting us as young as 3-year-old for their children. we don't really see anything before that, but we only see that occasionally. Typically, they come in mass droves once they hit school, so like 5 or 6 years old. That's when we have the biggest issue because they're having some problems lining up in the correct line. Kids are asked to go to the boys' line and then the girls' line. They don't go to the one that the teacher thinks they should. They're playing in the wrong play groups. They're befriending the wrong kids, things like that. And that's when we're contacted. And also, I wanted to comment on the dysphoria part, if I may. You know, puberty is hard enough for anybody in the best of circumstances. If you have everything as ideal in your world and you have supportive parents, like he talked about, you know, but if you are gender creative and you break away from the gender norms, you have this concept of who you are. You're intrinsically male or you're intrinsically female, and your body betrays you with the onset of puberty. That's hell. So a lot of our kids are contacting us on their own right, not through their parents, but they're picking up the phone and calling us when they're going through puberty. Early onset of puberty is really difficult for a lot of these kids. You know, when a boy suddenly has menses, you know, that's devastating. When a girl isn't getting breast buds along with her peers, that's pretty devastating too. So it depends on, you know, the age for who's calling us for what. But kindergarten age, a lot of the parents call us or their schools call us, but the kids themselves call us during 10 or 2 or the early onset of puberty.
What about the children of trans people? Do you help them?
I facilitate a support group for them. We have a transparent support group. So either way, if you're a parent of a transgender child or if you're a transgender person with children, we have a support group for them. But those are totally different issues than just focusing on the kids and connecting them with resources. But yeah, that's another side of the coin.
The other panelist, could you tell us, how old were you when you first realized that you were questioning your assigned gender?
For myself, I was probably 6th grade. Before then, I was always a tomboy, and you hear that a lot. Actually, my wife was a tomboy as well, but she didn't transition to male. 6th grade, I wanted to play the lead male role in a school play, and I got it. And I was ecstatic, and that's pretty much when I felt like I was a little boy. I had cut my hair short. People were starting to call me by male pronouns, and I liked it. I didn't want to correct them. So I would say maybe about 6 would be the earliest that I can recall.
Well, I knew for me it was, I liked what you said, the moment I had an opinion about myself, whatever age that was, I wanted to be a boy. And I remember, I have a distinct memory of, you know, the Bugs Bunny cartoon? There was the witch with the pointy hat and the wand, and she could turn people into frogs. And I would pray that God would make her come while I was sleeping and wave the wand, and I'd wake up a boy. And I look under the sheets, and it didn't happen. And I remember, I think that's the first time I had a resentment. I became very angry that this wasn't changing. So very young for me.
I never really specifically remember a time in my life when I was content with being male. And I do have very clear memories from being from the 1st grade, which would be about 6 years old, where I was really envying the girls and wishing I could be a girl. And I remember there was a TV show, I believe it was Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. I hate to date myself like that because I'm I'm 39 years old and have been for the past 11 years. And but they made a reference to, in a joke sketch, but to a sex change operation. That's kind of the first moment I was aware that it was impossible, and that kind of started a fascination in my use of the idea of changing sex. And that show was on from like 68 to 70, so that kind of puts a time frame in where it would have been.
Well, keeping on the young tees, Logan, we heard in Family Journey they were basically referencing, without I don't think really identifying, puberty blockers. Could you tell us more about what puberty blockers are? You know, what they're used for? Are they harmful? Are they beneficial?
Great. That's a really popular question that we get a lot of families asking about, are the puberty blockers. And basically, when a child goes into Tanner 2, there's 5 stages of puberty. Earliest stage of puberty is Tanner 2, and that's when the gonads start releasing hormones in the body. So your body's going to start taking on the secondary sexual characteristics of male or female. And that can be rather devastating for a transgender person. So the puberty blockers essentially block your body from absorbing testosterone or estrogen. They delay the onset of puberty. And for the kids that are set on their course, there's no ambivalence, there's no question remaining in their mind about who they are. That also can help to stop their body from producing the hormones, as well as allowing the supplemental hormones to take better effect. So, like for my daughter, she's on blockers, so she won't have testosterone ravaging her body, but also it allows her to take a lower dose of estrogen to be able to supplement her body with the hormones that are right for her, so she can go through a puberty that's pure congruent at the time that's right for her.
So if we put a child on puberty blockers and then it's decided that maybe this isn't the best choice, have we done any damage to the child by putting them on blockers?
No, there's everything with blockers it's just putting you in stasis. It's putting you on hold. So you're not damaging the disc if you pause it so you can run to the bathroom. It's the same thing. You're just pausing it so that either your parents or society can have more time to think about it, come to terms with it. Acceptance is kind of in there. And also, you know, again, to allow you to supplement hormone therapy at a much lower dose. But it's not changing you in any way. Puberty blockers are completely safe. You're not putting anything in your body, it's stopping your body from taking something that you would otherwise be producing.
Logan, I have a question. I don't know much about it, but I've read a couple of things online. It says if you take the hormone blockers and it goes past the age of 16, that you can do some damage. Do you know of any studies? And then once you go on the cross hormones, it doesn't prevent your body from developing its natural gametes. And what about fertility?
Right. So the blockers for our group are Dr. Spack in Boston. Traditionally kept the kids on blockers until they were 15-ish, because 16 is the age that you really can't delay puberty any longer. Your body really needs to go through puberty one way or the other. You can't keep a child emotionally either, speaking on that side of it, trapped in pre-adolescence indefinitely. That's going to cause harm. I mean, who wants to be a 16-year-old football player that hasn't hit puberty? It's going to be a really big problem, or a cheerleader for that matter. I mean, wherever you're at. It's going to be a problem. You need to go through puberty at the time that's right for you. Pure congruence is really important. But yes, they are thinking that if you delay the onset of puberty beyond like Tanner 3, Tanner 4, like age 16, then that could cause adverse effects as well. Just keeping yourself indefinitely a child is obviously not going to be beneficial for you. And then there's the growth plates going through reaching your full height. You know, it's really just not meant for indefinite. You don't want to keep somebody as a child into their 20s and 30s, but it does allow you that extra few years to balance out your hormones, figure out what you're going to do, let your family come to terms with it, and give you a chance to move forward.
I'm sorry, the second part of that, though, the cross hormones, what if someone decides that they actually want to have children a little bit later? I speak from personal experience because I didn't solidly know until my 30s. So I don't think as a child that I would be equipped to make that decision.
It's so important that these kids are given an opportunity to go through the puberty that's right for them to live authentically as early as possible, because if let's say you have a natal male that is truly a female. If you have a transgender woman that's not transitioning, you said, for a man in 30s, but if I didn't let my daughter transition, say, until she was in her 30s, there's no undoing her height growth. There's no undoing the size of her hands and her feet. The things that can be corrected surgically are expensive and painful. The laser to remove hair, the facial feminization surgery. There's a lot of things they can do, but it is painful and it is expensive. And why would we torture people to go through these things, if they don't have to? There's medical intervention. We can do this correctly the first time through. And they have a right to that. I had a right to go through the puberty that was right for me. I think my daughter has the same right. So definitely, they need to not have to wait until they're in their 30s.
So, but the fertility part,
I'm sorry?
the fertility part, what if they're unable to
right.
have children?
I always defer that to Dr. Jo Olson. Unfortunately, she's in LA, so the fertility part is still, you're really interesting to have on this panel. No.
I'm asking because I'm trying to find the answers myself, and I became an accidental transgender reproductive rights spokesperson.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that that's something that people need to find out for themselves throughout their journey. And I'm curious, the journey that children are going through and how people are facilitating that and supporting that, and would like more resources available to them as well as options.
Right. For the biological part, I'm not a fertilitist or an endo, so I really feel ill-prepared to answer that. And I can parrot what I've heard from Dr. Jo Olson in LA, but I'm afraid I wouldn't do it justice. So I'd speak from a parent perspective with my own daughter. She has no interest in parenting her own biological child, so it is different there. We also adopted a little girl from China, so for her, adoption is a very natural family building experience. So in our case, with my daughter, she does anticipate becoming a mother, but she probably will go to China specifically to do that. So she won't be, she doesn't expect to be the first trans woman to have a uterus implant and go through that, because in her words, it would be too painful.
It is.
Well, I was just going to say that in the many aspects of transition is a very complex thing with a lot of dimensions to it. You get social and hormonal, medical, and there's this kind of surgical thing hanging out here. And so, in approaching it with your own child, are you where do you see place an importance on the idea of surgery as a part of it? Because that's sort of like the thing which really kind of kills the concept of reproductive rights. Is that something that you see as being a part of transition youth? Or is that something that you would say that should be put off into some point in adulthood where they can firmly make a decision for themselves as if that's what they want to be as a part of their transition?
Well, certainly I wouldn't advocate for surgical intervention with like a 5-year-old or something. At the same time, though, I don't see any value in putting off corrective surgery for what my daughter calls a birth defect indefinitely. That seems cruel and unusual. In researching surgery for my daughter, I've automatically excluded surgeons that will not work with my daughter until she's 18. And we've got a list of surgeons that have accepted my daughter as a patient for sexual reassignment surgery at 16. She's almost 11, so that's still 5 years, and that seems like an eternity in kid time. 5 years when you're 11 years old, that's a long time. And that's just something that I have to look at to hold up my end of the deal with my daughter as her parent, to provide for her a life-saving surgery before she's 18, before she is an adult, before she goes into dating and sexuality. She needs to have the right stuff to work with. For my daughter, that's imperative. Some people are very comfortable, as the films showed, being more gender fluid or finding their place along the continuum. My daughter happens to be more representative of the far female end of the spectrum. I don't know where she got that, but somehow she came by it in her own right. And she has to wait at her end of the deal to not do her own corrective surgery. She's attempted that in the past, and that was horrific. So I'm not going to make her wait until she's 18. I'm fully supporting it if there's a consistent and persistent expression of gender identity over time. I mean, how long is time? But for her, 5, 10 years into it, I'm convinced I'm sold. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Erica, since it was brought up as far as surgeries, and I know that that's something that you're passionate about, is addressing the relationship between, if you could define what SRS surgery is, and as far as just surgeries and being transgender.
Yeah, really the modern age of transgenderism was brought on by kind of two medical developments, and one was development of hormones as pharmaceutical products, either through synthetic or natural means, and the other was the development of surgical procedures, most especially, certainly in the popular mind, the public mind, genital altering surgeries. And certainly, like with Christine Jorgensen in the early 50s, coming out into the public, brought forth this idea of changing sex across society as a whole, which had both positive and negative ramifications. And in the mind of most people, it was intensely negative. But for a lot of people, generations of people now, who felt themselves to be transgender inside, it opened a door that made it possible for them to come forward and start living in the sex they've always felt. I think one of the most interesting things that's kind of come as a result of that is that a lot of people have learned in the course of doing so that it isn't an absolute necessity in their lives that they get surgery in order to feel a more contented life in their gender. One thing I liked about this film is that of the people they profiled, no one identified as having had sexual reassignment surgery, and at least a couple of people clearly said that they didn't necessarily feel it was important in their lives. A lot of people do feel it's important in their lives, and I'll be open and say that I have had it, and I have no regrets of having had it, and I'm glad that I had it. But at the same time, I know an awful lot of people who can't get it because of financial means, because these surgeries are outrageously expensive. I do know quite a lot of people who just don't necessarily feel that it's that important in their lives to get it done. But there is a collision between transgender people and society when it comes to the subject of surgery. On the one hand, there are government entities across the country who say that surgery is the definition of changing sex, and that you must get this surgery for you to be recognized in the sex that you live. At the same time, there are other people on the medical and business insurance side who will create all kinds of hurdles and barriers in your way, making it extremely difficult to get these surgeries because they don't take us seriously in the gender that we express, because there is an innate prejudice in the system against us, and they want to make it hard for us. There are forces that say that we don't think this is a real phenomenon, and we're not going to let you proceed with this unless you have proven to us definitively that this is exactly what you feel. So these surgeries become a really big flashpoint. My opinion that if you kind of look at sort of transgender people across the entire scope of the experience of many, many people, the conclusion I've come to is that there are available to transgender people surgical procedures, many surgical procedures, not just genital altering surgical procedures, but there are many of them, which are really of equal weight when you get right down to it, that can help a person feel better and live fuller lives in the sex that they identify with. But it is really up to them to decide for themselves what they have to live a contented life. And these surgeries are not perfect. They are not complete. They can't change everything. We have surgeries that can change some things. We don't necessarily have surgeries that change everything. There are transsexuals who say that once they get SRS, they feel like they are cured, they are complete, it's done everything for them. I do not understand those people. I have had the surgery. Wonderful. That part of my body is fixed. My hips are still too narrow, my waist is still too wide, my shoulders are still too broad. There are all kinds of things they can't fix. So we need to keep a healthy perspective on what these surgeries are. To get a healthy perspective, we're going to realize that they are necessary for some people, and it is unreasonable of the insurance industry and the medical industry to make it so very, very difficult for us to get them. At the same time, it is unreasonable of government and legal entities saying that you must have this profound change to your body done in order to be recognized and be validated in the sex that you live every single day of your life. And it puts us in the trans community is in a very difficult position that we seem to be fighting conflicting fights in the opposite direction at the same time. We have to fight to get insurance companies to give us, to pay for these surgeries because it's a vital part of how we live, while at the same time having to fight government and political entities saying you shouldn't force us to get these surgeries because for some of us it's just not necessary. But we're put in this position because these two entities are at polar opposite ends of each other in unreasonable directions. Insurance companies saying you can't get it, and government saying you have to get it. But in the end, it is an individual choice. It needs to be an individual choice, and individual choices in this matter and how we control our bodies and what we do with our bodies, feel right in our lives, needs to be respected. I have a dream today.
Julian, do you have anything that you would like to add as far as what is your view on surgeries and transgender?
Well, I agree with Erica. I think that's an individual choice, and you know, it's really an important thing for me. It's something I've wanted since I was a child, before I knew it was even possible. So it would be a dream for me, a dream come true, to be able to get lower surgery. It's unaffordable for me, and it is very frustrating that I will have to fight my employer to get that covered and go through all that work and possibly not have it happen. I don't know how in my lifetime I can make that happen. It's really important to me. Having said that, I have an amazing life today. I have a lot of blessings, and you know, I look at that. I look at the positive things in my life, but it's extremely frustrating to know that I may never get this. But again, doing that won't make me any more male. Somebody who doesn't get surgery, it doesn't validate who they are as a person. It's just something I personally want to do.
Thomas?
I completely agree with both of these guys. Yeah, I have a problem with the government policing what we should do with our bodies, and what, you know, it's just wrong. I just got back from Sweden. Over there, they have a requirement for sterilization for transgender people to legally transition, and that's a big problem. As far as myself, I feel like I'm fully transitioned, and if I do any future surgeries, they'd be completely elective, but it is a personal choice. And I think the bottom line is self-acceptance and self-love and being okay with yourself, because truly it comes from the inside.
I think it's a good segue into passing. We also heard passing referenced a lot in these movies, and it's defined differently by different people. Julian, could you possibly address then what does it mean to pass, and what is your view of passing? And as far as using you as a great example, I'm sure everybody who doesn't already know you, anyone walking down the street would automatically assume, never guess that you were ever, you know, assigned at birth female. So what does those assumptions mean to you?
Well, I loved what the person said in the film, that it almost implies that I'm tricking you, that I'm passing. So I don't necessarily like the word, but I understand what it means if somebody asks me about that. I feel like I was passing when I was presenting as female. I was fitting into this thing. I was trying to trick people because I knew who I was. I was male. So I feel now like I'm not, you know what I mean? I'm living authentically today. And I want to touch on a little bit that, yes, I feel very blessed in my appearance today. Nobody would know unless I told them. But I want to make it really clear that that doesn't make me more valid. I don't think that it matters what you look like. It's who you say you are and who you feel you are. I think that's really important to know. We're a very visual society, and I really hope that that gets broken, that people will validate each other for who they say they are. We know who we are, and that's all that's important.
Any additional comments?
I would, kind of narrowly define the term passing is that, for the time that somebody is exposed to you, they take you to be natal in the gender you present. But there's also, that's a very valid perspective of passing is for the time somebody's exposed to you, they take you as somebody acceptable. There's a couple of different ways of viewing it. And there are, for the most of my life, I am a proud transsexual person, and I am fine with being a proud and out transsexual person. But still, there are moments in my life where I don't necessarily want it to be an issue in my life. That if I run inside of a store to buy something, I don't want my transgenderness to be a central issue of my going inside to get milk. So in that scenario, in that context, I want to pass. Passing ties in very much into kind of a sense of what gender identity is in times. I think gender identity has kind of three basic components, and that is to feel your gender, to express your gender, and to be perceived by others in your gender. And we balance and juggle these things off all the time. And for someone who is kind of being forced to live in the wrong sex, basically you're not really allowed to express the gender you feel, which makes it very, very hard without any feedback coming in to feel the gender you want to be. It puts you in constant conflict. And all of your gender expression is for the purpose of how other people perceive you. And expression of gender for everybody at some point, and sometimes, in some places, some context of their life is some kind of a trade-off between expressing what you want to feel inside and trying to manipulate the perceptions of other people around you. And passing then is, in terms of being an action and activity, is when you're committing pretty much everything of your expression for the purpose of manipulating the perceptions of other people to be how you want to be perceived, either as a sense of satisfaction yourself, which passing is for a lot of people. Just, I want to pass just because it's very, very important to me that you perceive me as female or male, however I identify. And I won't feel right about myself if for a moment think that you're not perceiving me as complete. And for some people, it's a matter of safety and just practicality. They want to get in and get their milk and get out, and they want to get beat up doing it. Yeah, passing is at some place something that comes up and is kind of unavoidable to escape in the lives of trans people. Genderqueer people, I think, are really kind of like that model of somebody who says that I don't have to pass, I don't want to pass, I'm going to make it a point of not passing. That they're going to be very proud in going out and saying that your perception of me is unimportant to me, and I will express myself as I see fit. But for someone like myself, I still want to be able to get my milk and not get punched out.
I just want to throw in there too, a lot of people talk about passing, and that kind of leads into going stealth. If you can pass, then maybe you can go stealth. So a lot of our kids and the families, when we do a lot of the school in-services, their schools are saying, well, why does anybody have to know? You're going to a whole new school district, you've moved to a whole new state, you've been run out of town, or whatever the case may be. Then why does anybody have to know? Well, some kids want to be able to talk about who they are. Most kids, I think, have a sense of pride in whoever they are. So when people ask my daughter, for instance, why she's out and proud, and why does she feel it necessary to tell that she's trans, well, her sister is Chinese, and she doesn't have to keep that a secret, so why does this one have to keep it a secret that she's transgender? Because when she meets people waiting in line for the popcorn at the movie theater, she's not just, hi, my name is Sadie, I have a Great Dane dog, my favorite color is pink. She's, hi, my name's Sadie, I'm a transgender girl and vegetarian. Do you know what that means? She's very excited to tell you exactly what that means. She's very proud of that, and I think she has a right to that. She should be proud of who she is. So passing and stealth, I think, kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, that actually brings up a really good point, is it seems like in the last 5 years, the visibility of transgender has just exploded, and we have so many people that are no longer, I think that's always been the norm, is you are advised to go stealth. And now we have as young as your daughter and then all the way up who are no longer adhering to that, saying, no, we need to educate. And how are we going to move further in this if we don't, if we go into hiding and no one knows that we exist? Is that something, I mean, you all are out and here publicly speaking, and so are you seeing this same trend? Is there a benefit to seeing a lot of transgender individuals now not going stealth and making themselves public?
Yeah, from personal experience, I've seen just like a rocket taking off with transgender issues in the media, especially transgender youth, and like Chaz Bono, and it's a big thing now, and I think it's really important that people are visible. And I have to admit that when I was transitioning, it was the most awkward time of my life, and it was just uncomfortable having to constantly explain to people, and I quickly wanted to move from female to male so it wouldn't be so uncomfortable. And so for quite a few years, I assimilated, and it felt really good. And I moved, and I started a new life, and I was just the guy next door with a wife. And then this pregnancy thing happened, and then I couldn't hide that, and then now I'm out there. So people know about my past, and I, in effect, don't pass anymore because there I am. And I think it's important, and this is why I continue to speak, because there's a message that it's okay to be transgender. It's okay to be who you are. And people need to see more examples of that we don't bite, we're just normal people. And so being in the media is great, and I support everyone doing it.
So my time in this community, I really kind of first made contact with the trans community in the city in 2004, and at that time they were incredibly secretive, and there's been a major shift over the past decade, and I've said many times that the watershed event in the history of the transsexual community was September 11th, 2001, because after that date, we became much more exposed, and the government would reveal gender mismatch issues. There was much more investigation in people's past. It always was throughout the history, from Christine Jorgensen being the major exception, but from that point forward, that the fundamental element of the model of transsexualism was that you had to hide, you had to go stealth, that there was no discussion on the subject of transsexualism, that didn't center and revolve around that as its most important element. And since in the past decade, we have seen the new model of transsexualism coming forward, which is to say that, that we should be able to live out and open and honest as to what we are. We should try to seek out protections from discrimination so that we don't have to hide and we don't have to conceal our identity. And we don't have to be forced from one complete gender binary into another complete gender binary in order to hide from ourselves. And I personally, I'm a trans woman who does not live a completely female life. I can tell you with absolute certainty that if this weren't going on today, I would be at home underneath my Mustang changing the clutch. So, you know, I don't want to be forced into a completely feminine female life. That in many respects, you could describe me as genderqueer, because I don't say that I'm going to cut out everything in my life that's not feminine. That wouldn't be me either. That there are masculine elements to me, there is feminine elements to me. I want to feel and I want to express femininity, but at the same time, I have areas that are mechanical and automotive. I'm an engineer by nature. So I think that in order for transgender people to both be able to come out of our hiding that we are, because most people who feel uncomfortable with gender to this day are still have never come forward to do anything about their gender, that they still feel the world won't let them do that. And to be able to really have a world where we can truly be happy as transgender people, we have to recognize that we shouldn't have to hide ourselves, we shouldn't have to conform to a different gender binary, that we should be able to express our gender differently at different times, at different places in our lives, however feels right for us.
From personal experience, you know, I don't believe that I would have waited 39 years to transition if I would have known there were others like me. I didn't know who to talk to about this. I had no idea what to do, and it just kept getting stuff down. And I remember it was in 2001, maybe, I was watching the Discovery Channel, and there was this documentary, and it's called You Don't Know Dick. It's an amazing documentary, and for the first time in my life, I saw guys that were just like me, They were lucid, they were sane, they were well-educated, they were well-spoken, and they were just regular guys. And for the first time in my life, I saw myself in another person. And I really, really valued and was grateful for the fact that this was in '95 when this video was made. We were told, I've heard in early gender clinics, to burn your pictures, move out of town, and keep your mouth shut, and live as the gender you're assigned now. So it took tremendous courage for those guys to do that, and they affected my life in such a deep way. For me, I think it's an individual choice whether you're stealth or not. For me, I want to give back like they gave back. There might be somebody I can affect that way. So, and I think educating the public will make life easier for all of us. And I met a trans youth at a conference I go to in Seattle. He was 8 years old. And when I looked at him, I saw myself, and it was very moving for me. And I thought, you know what? This child has an opportunity I don't have. He's got a community now, and I want to facilitate that, and I always want to be available. So a kid doesn't have to wait till they're 39 to do this. So.
Julian, you touched on a really important subject, and also an audience member touched on it, and that is community support. Could you address what community support do we have in this area for our transgender population?
Well, there's actually so much now. When I wanted to transition, I remember it took 2 months. My counselor didn't have any idea what to do. She was a great counselor, but she found 2 phone numbers for me. The first one I called, this is John, leave your name and number. And I'm like, hey, I'm not talking to this guy. and the other one was for Transgender Harmony, and it was mostly transgender women, and Erica's one of the first people I met. I went to this party, and I had a need to meet other trans guys, and they directed me to Tucson. So back in 2006, 2005, I had to go, my wife and I, once a month to a support group in Tucson. There wasn't anything here. Today, we have a group called Arizona Transmasculine Society, and it's for any female-bodied, masculine-identified individual, and we also have something for their SOFAs, significant other, family, friends, and allies. So there's a group for both. There's a transgender support group at the VA. There's Transgender Harmony, which I mentioned. This is how. Hope House. Michael Brown has Genderific. And there's one on the East Valley, one in, I think he's West Valley. Yeah, there's tons of stuff here. I mean, we can get you information if you're interested. Yeah, so much more now today.
Yeah, Phoenix is a very support-rich city. Yeah.
Right. We have trans youth family allies for the children, their families, caregivers, teachers.
Oh, 1 in 10.
We have Ian Lounge in southern Arizona. In Tucson, we have Ian Lounge for that population, that sector, for the teenagers. And unfortunately, a lot of them are exactly as you described, the homeless youth. Their family have rejected them and things.
But maybe I misunderstood. We do have 1 in 10, which is an amazing youth organization for GLBT individuals here in the Valley. And there's tons of stuff going on with 1 in 10 for the youth.
And there's another trans masculine support group that has started up in the North Phoenix area as well that meets on Mondays, and they welcome SOFAs every other week. So I can, afterwards, I think some of us will be out in the lobby to talk to any of you if anyone wants more information on that particular support group. And there's also a brand new trans feminine support group that's starting for both, same as the ATMS and SOFA's group that you just referenced. It's the same format. It'll be taking place once a month on the 3rd Saturdays of every month at One Voice Community Center. So we're trying to reach out to everybody in the community, and hopefully we'll have some things starting in place as well for our youth local. So, okay, what we're going to do is there any, we're going to open it up to the audience for questions. I think we do have volunteers out there with microphones. Okay, is there anything that the panel wants to address to the audience before we open it up to audience Okay.
I do. I want to say, please ask me any question that you have. Again, if you're not comfortable, please ask me after this. I don't want anyone to feel like they can't ask something.
Yeah, what's your PIN number? I'll give you that.
First of all, thank all of you very much. As the general population becomes more educated, are you seeing the discrimination within our community diminish?
What's our community?
The LGBT or the LGB part of our community.
I think she's asking about the actual discrimination within the LGB against the T type of discrimination in our community.
I know that I've heard of that, but I have to say, in this city, I've been so completely embraced and encouraged by the LGB community. I feel very accepted and loved. But having said that, I do know that I hear from other people that sometimes that does happen, but I think that they're becoming more embracing of us than maybe 5-10 years ago. But my personal experience has been wonderful.
I think that kind of a part of trans people sort of coming out and being more open is they've also been a lot more open and connecting with the LGBT community. And I am surprised the number of people that I've met in the LGBT community who said that I'm the first trans person they've met. And I think that's changing. And a lot of any kind of negative attitudes may exist in the LGBT community toward trans people is similar to what you'd find in the rest of society as a whole, in that if you haven't had a chance to meet someone, you have a lot of stereotypes in mind about them. And I think that in the past few years we've had a much better connection between the LGBT community and the T, and I think that the lines between them are becoming more and more blurred all the time. And yeah, I think that's changed a lot, that we are becoming all one and much better connected than we've ever been before.
Good afternoon. And first, thank you for sharing and your insight and just being here. I appreciate it so much. My question is almost a follow-up of hers. I keep thinking about the statistics that were shared around 320 transgender people were killed or murdered, and 41% committed or attempted suicide. So I have a couple of questions, and hopefully I can get it out. With the increase in awareness, with the explosion in terms of education and there being more folks on national television, and is the community more open? Are we seeing those numbers go down? And with more support out there, are people coming forth and seeking out that support? So that's one aspect. The other thing is that I noticed that the panel doesn't look like me, or doesn't represent what I look like, though I'm not transgendered. So my other question is, of those 320 people who were murdered, and the 41% who attempted suicide, do we have a cultural breakdown? Do we know how many of those folks, do we know what their ethnic background was? And is it more challenging if you were a person of color, if you're from a different ethnicity? Of any of those groups that you talked about, how open, how welcoming they are? I mean, if I was to come to any of those groups, would anybody look like me, or any of the facilitators that look like me? So that's my question, those are my comments, those are my concerns.
Well, I'm sure that it is. I mean, the National Center for Transgender Equality did a recent study that showed definitively that when you combine gender and race, that the level of discrimination experience just goes through the roof. That Black transgender Americans face just horrendous discrimination, and I can also think I can say reasonably that if you could do a racial breakdown of the people that you were seeing killed, that there would be an extreme bias toward minority populations. Now that number, I would assume, I've not seen that statistic pop up before. I would assume that's worldwide to see that large of a number, which means that you're going to have ethnic issues in many parts of the world that might come into place. So that just the American experience of ethnicity wouldn't be the only factor that played into that size of a number. But it is still true that Black transgender Americans have like 70% unemployment. The numbers are just outrageous and through the roof.
Erica and Julian, thank you so much. This is really an exciting time for me, because in my infancy and the love that I had from my parents. There were no blockers for me. And I transitioned at the age of 14 with wonderful parents, moved to Arizona, and had a wonderful life. I coined myself the transgender trailblazer, the woman mentioned of color. I teach special ed. I'm 59 years old and have made a difference, and I've watched it change and grow in a positive. And yet, being an educator in the school system that I teach, people still look at me as though I'm a freak. And I had my surgery in 1973. So I know I've been a woman all my life, long before black was beautiful. I've never been asked to be a part of the dialogue, and I've done wonderful things for the community. Came out in the community and put a face when girls were dying from HIV. I was the one that put the doctors in place that gay men and trans could die with dignity. And yet, I'm pushed to the side, but I know my lane, and I was doing it long before when segregation was telling me it's gonna be all right. I have a dream and I have lived it. I have a storytelling, and some of you girls are coming to talk about the journey. That's what we need. We need to connect the dots and educate the parents. I'm educating parents every day by letting them know, if I can do it in the 60s with the computer, truly, your baby can do it with this computer. And I refuse to retire. And I can retire at this age, but I have a mission. And I want to be a part of this, because you can trace my paper trail from my birth all the way up through access. I'm finished, and God bless you all.
Thank you.
And I just like to say, in case you all don't know Miss Millie, I think she's a true matriarch of our local transgender community, and a wonderful expert on all things transgender. And she wrote a book. I would urge you to look for it on Amazon.com. And if you have a chance to talk to her or meet her, you go up and introduce yourself afterwards. She's a wonderful, wonderful person.
My question is, how did it work coming out in the workplace? You know, with economic times being what they are now, and you know, fear of losing a job, fear of not working. How does that work? You know, any problems at the workplace? I know one person that can't get tenure at one of the colleges because she does not pass well, and you know, she says this is the problem, that she can't get tenure.
I'll talk about my experience coming out at work. When I transitioned, I worked at a very liberal, open job place. We had, I think, one of everything. So I got really, really lucky. I worked at the Castle Boutique. So, I mean, I told my boss I wanted to do this, and he had my name tag changed. He had a meeting with everyone that this is a personal. I mean, it was a blessing. It was truly a blessing. But recently, you know, now I've gone through everything. My paperwork's done, and you know, although I'm out and visible for educational panels, and I do it in appropriate settings, I just got a new job at the Mayo Clinic, and I don't think it's appropriate to say, hey, I'm Julian, I'm the new guy, and guess what, I'm transgendered. I'm there to do a job, finish a job, and I made some great friendships there. Well, I was maliciously outed recently by a girl at work. It was horrible, the things she did and said. I found out about it, and the two guys that I'm really close with, one, she outed me to him, and he told me. I went to my boss, and she said, she didn't even let me finish. She said, this is absolutely unacceptable. I'm going immediately to HR, and she fired her. They fired her. So, although there's no anti-discrimination policy in writing, they don't need one at the Mayo Clinic. They don't deal with that kind of behavior. The other piece of that is two of my close friends there, the one guy I was outed to said, I like you as a person, I don't care. And the other one I told personally, I'd rather have him hear it from me. He said, this is the best thing I've ever heard anyone say when I've told them. He said, wow, you made the right choice. Biology was wrong, you were right. I'm like, wow, this guy is great. And you know what? They liked me for the content of my character, and I think that's what we all want. You know, I'm glad that they knew me as a person before they had this preconceived notion of what it is to be transgender. Now they know somebody, and they like me already. So, yeah, I've had good experiences.
Great. That's an absolutely awesome positive note to end this on. We have completely run out of time, which I knew would be an issue with this topic. So will the panel be available out in the lobby for if anyone would like to ask additional questions? Great. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, Logan, Erica, Julian, Thomas. Thank you very much.